Welcome to this Climate Chat Club interview with Henk Rogers. I'm your host, Dan Miller. Henk Rogers is world-renowned in the gaming industry for creating Japan's first role-playing game and for being the owner of Tetris. Henk is also a leader in the energy transition movement. Through his Blue Planet Foundation, he helped Hawaii commit to a 100% renewable energy future, and he is now working with other cities, states, and countries to do the same. This interview is part of a series of interviews with climate scientists, technologists, authors, advocates, communicators, and others involved in understanding and fighting climate change. It is sponsored by the Climate Chat Club on the social platform Clubhouse. If you're a member of Clubhouse, please join our club. And you can also find other interviews by searching for Climate Chat Club on YouTube. And now, my interview with Henk Rogers. I would like to welcome Henk Rogers as our special guest today. A lot of folks will know Henk for his work with Tetris, and we're going to hear a little bit about that. There's some exciting things happening there, and there's a movie being made about Henk, so that's going to be fun to hear about. But the part that people don't know as much about is his tireless work in developing, moving the world to clean energy. And as we know, that's a key component to fighting climate change. Is we got to stop using fossil fuels and move to clean energy. And Henk has done a lot of work, especially in Hawaii, and now is moving to other parts of the world. So we're going to be talking about that today. But before we kind of get started on talking about the details of what the work he's doing in clean energy, Henk, could you please give us all you have a very interesting background. And you've done lots of different things. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to sort of your role in the clean energy revolution?
Yeah, sure. Gosh, where do I start? I was born in the Netherlands, 11 years in Holland, 8 years in New York City. I went to Stuyvesant High School in New York City, 4 years in Hawaii, fell in love with the ocean, lived on the beach for a year, learned how to surf and dive. 18 years in Japan, 7 years in San Francisco, 18 years in Hawaii, and now you're in Seattle area. So my background is I majored in computer science and minored in Dungeons and Dragons in college. And 6 years later, personal computers came out in Japan. I was living in Japan at the time, and I wrote the first role-playing game in Japan. So it's kind of my claim to fame. It's probably something that nobody in this country knows about because it was a big hit. It was number one in Japan in 1984, but it never made it outside Japan because the resolution of the computers outside Japan was crappy. What can I say? Because Japanese have the disadvantage of having to display kanji or Chinese characters. So we had high-res displays. Anyway, most of you will probably know me because of my involvement in Tetris. As I became a publisher in Japan, went around the world looking for games to bring to Japan. One of those games was Tetris, and eventually I ended up in Moscow chasing down the Game Boy rights and met the author of Tetris, who is my partner till today. So we still own and run Tetris. I myself am not involved in the business per se. I get involved every once in a while if something new is happening. But my daughter runs the company now, Maya, and she does a much better job than I ever did as as a company president. I'm much more of an entrepreneur wanting to do new things rather than keep something going that's been going for a long time. Well, let's see. In 2002, I moved back to Hawaii to start a mobile phone game company, which I sold 3 years later. And a month after I sold that company, which made me enough money that I didn't have to work anymore, I found myself in the back of an ambulance with 100% blockage of the Widowmaker. If I'd have been anywhere else besides 15 minutes from a major angioplasty facility, I would have died that day. So if I was on the Big Island or on the other side of this island, whatever, I would be gone. But fortunately, they got me to the hospital in time. I have 2 stents. It's no big deal. But as I'm in that ambulance, I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. I haven't spent any of the money yet. That was the first thing I thought. And the second thing I said, no, I'm not going. I still have stuff to do. And so in the recovery room, I'm thinking, what did I mean by stuff? Obviously, this was a life changing, if not ending, moment for me. And I wanted to know, what is it that's going to piss me off if I didn't do something about it by the end of my life? And so I started looking for my missions in life. And the first one came to me in the back of a newspaper. This is Hawaii. Christ's sakes, this is the most important thing in Hawaii. And yet it's in the back of the newspaper, sort of by the obituaries. It said, oh, by the way, we're going to kill all the coral in the world by the end of the century. And I'm going, you idiots, what are you talking about? That's no way that we're allowed to do that. You know, it's taken coral millions of years to become what it is today, and it's a core part of the ocean ecosystem. What's causing that? It's ocean acidification. What's causing that? It's carbon dioxide being absorbed into the ocean. The reason that we don't have worse global warming today is that the ocean has absorbed so much of the carbon dioxide that we released into the atmosphere. And so my first mission is to end the use of carbon-based fuel. So to that end, I started a foundation called the Blue Planet Foundation. And I think Dan is going to ask me a bunch of questions about the Blue Planet Foundation.
Yes, I will. Okay, so that's maybe a great, yeah, great starting point. Well, yeah, let's talk about Blue Planet because you got started there. It was earlier than a lot of people realize, and I've done a lot of work to shift. Well, actually, what's really interesting, tell us about Hawaii's energy supply before renewables. Like, what was that like? What the cost of energy? Where did that energy come from?
Yeah. So Hawaii being in the middle of the ocean, we don't have access to the normal sources of power that you have on the mainland, and certainly we don't have nuclear because we're an island. If anything goes wrong with a nuclear facility on an island, there's no way you can evacuate. You know, we have 1.5 million people on on these islands combined. There's no way you can evacuate that kind of numbers of people. We spend $5 billion, that's with a B, $5 billion a year on oil. 30% of that oil goes to make jet fuel, 30% goes for ground transportation, that's gasoline and diesel, and 40%, the bottom of that bunker oil, gets burned for making electricity. How ridiculous is that when we're actually the mecca of renewable energy? We're the southernmost state, which means we have the best solar, and we have 95% of the time we have trade winds, which means that we have, wind to die for. And on top of that, we have geothermal under the Big Island, and that geothermal resource, there's enough power there to power the state and a lot more for the rest of time. That hotspot has been there for hundreds of millions of years, and it's just a resource waiting to be tapped. So yeah, here we are spending all that
Yeah,
money on
people don't
oil.
realize that it's very unusual to burn oil for electricity, except for islands. I guess is the place where that happens.
Well, there was a yeah, well, pretty much all islands import some kind of fossil fuel for their energy. And
Hmm.
that's kind of a ridiculous situation. You know, we have the highest energy cost in the country. Uh, the bottom is like 30 cents and the top is like 50 cents. And you go to
Right.
other islands in the Pacific and they're spending as much as $1 per kilowatt for electricity. And it isn't like these people are rich. These people are the poorest people in the
Right.
world because they don't really have an economy except for tourism, and so it's
Well, yeah,
kind
let's
of
put that in
insane thing
perspective,
that
by the way, because people don't realize. So in the Bay Area, which is a pretty expensive electricity area, you pay like 15 cents a kilowatt hour, although it can get up to 50 cents in peak hours, trying to discourage you from those times. Normal energy at many places around the country is like, especially for a company, would be like 5 cents a kilowatt hour. And then the amazing thing is solar, even for your house, is if you amortize it and everything, it's like 5 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that. So that's a really expensive uh, that's really expensive energy, and it's really dirty too at the same time. So
right. So the utility spends 22 cents per kilowatt hour. Well, it fluctuates, of course, with the price of oil, but 22 cents per kilowatt hour is their expense in buying oil based or fossil fuel based electricity. Renewables, meaning wind and solar, are around 8 cents. Same thing with geothermal. So
Hmm.
you know, the economics of it are so obvious and so clear that I don't understand why this transition hasn't happened, without our pushing. And we've been pushing for a long time.
Tell us some things you did and what the results were.
Well, so in order to get the politicians to listen to you at all, you have to get people on your side. So the first thing that we did was, sort of massive public outreach. What we did is for example, we got children to exchange 300,000 light bulbs going door to door. We had their little clubs in their elementary schools compete to see who could exchange the most light bulbs. And when a child comes to your door and says, I'd like to exchange your light bulbs and it's going to save you this much money if you do, I mean, that is a conversation, because an LED is 10% the amount of electricity of an incandescent light bulb. And you'd be surprised how many incandescent light bulbs are still out there.
Hmm.
So this brought people on our side. We went to outer islands and helped them get energy saver refrigerators. Normally, if you're on an outer island, you want a refrigerator, you've got to go to one of the main islands, buy the refrigerator, have it shipped. By the time it lands at your house, it's like 4 times more expensive than the fridge actually is. So we made a deal with GE and we shipped container loads of energy saver refrigerators to the outer islands. So again, all these people became our friends. And then when it came time, the biggest thing that we do is we create legislations and we lobby. And to give
Hmm.
you an example, we created a solar rebate, meaning that people would get money back if they put solar on their roof. And we calculated that we would have something like 30 megawatts of solar in 3 years. And actually, what happened is we had 300 megawatts of solar in 3 years. And the electric company goes, "Whoa, whoa, we can't handle that much intermittent energy onto our grid. The grid is not built that way." And I'll get back to that later.
Okay.
But our biggest claim to fame is we got Hawaii to have a mandate of 100% renewable energy. And we were asking for 2040, and the politicians were saying, we'll give you 2050. And we pulled out all the stops, and we managed to negotiate 2045.
Okay. And
Turns out
that law was
2045 is,
done in like 2015. It was a while ago. There are a lot of people talking
yeah,
about
it was
that
a while
now,
ago.
but this was ahead of the game back then.
Yeah, we were the first state to have a mandate.
Wow.
And so always been progressive as a state. We were the first state to say we are still in when Trump pulled us out of the Paris Agreement. We are still in,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. So we've been on the forefront, and I've got to say that Blue Planet Foundation, my foundation, gets a lot of credit for keeping the state on that track because we're the main, how can I say, pusher of renewable energy and clean energy in this state. Uh, but you can't just have a mandate and hope that it's going to happen. You have
Right.
to make sure that it happens. And so we followed it up by changing the business model of the utility so that they make more money the quicker they switch to renewables. So guess who's our best friend now? It's the utility. And so now that we're all rowing in the same direction, it feels like we're going to kill 2040. We're probably going to get 20 to 2035. Last year, they put out an RFP for 800 megawatts of renewable energy, which is half of Hawaii.
Wow.
So I think we're on track. And yeah, I mean, uh, there are so many things that we've done in Hawaii that are help move the state in the right direction. I met yesterday with the head of DBED, the Department of Economics, Business, DBED, Business something and Tourism. It's basically the organization that is figuring out how to run the economy of Hawaii,
Okay.
government organization. And right now we're in a tourism boom. Like you can't rent a car or find a hotel room. It's like full. It's all this pent up demand that is,
Right.
everybody from the mainland finally gets to go. And but he says, that's going to taper off. It's like a boom right now, but then it's going to go when the rest of the world opens up. It's going to go back to quote unquote normal. And I said, what you need to do, what Hawaii needs to do, is become a eco-friendly destination. For every plane that lands in Hawaii with a bunch of tourists, you need to plant trees to offset that carbon footprint. And once they arrive here, everybody should be driving electric cars or taking, carbon neutral transportation.
Right.
Yeah. So but I think it's not falling on deaf ears anymore. That's the big deal. So they're all
Okay.
thinking, yeah, that's the future we want.
By the way, you mentioned reforming utilities. People don't realize that it's the incentive systems that can really get in the way of progress. I guess when you look at the big picture, we have climate change because we have a policy in place that says you can pollute the atmosphere for free. So we shouldn't be surprised that's what's happening. But utilities actually have these incentive systems that you're helping to change that. But that really keep us from cleaning up our energy supply and things like that. So
Yeah, just to be clear, the old way that the electric company makes money is they get to make 10% on top of the price of oil,
right,
which means that they make more money the higher the price of oil is, which is an insane incentive.
correct. That's amazing. So,
It's
so,
just backwards.
and you've also been involved in education and training people to be climate activists and things. Can you just talk just a little bit about that? Oh, you mentioned a little bit
Yeah,
about
so
training the kids with the light bulbs. That was interesting.
right. So we have dedicated staff that are in schools pretty much every day talking to children about the future of energy in Hawaii and why it's so important. I mean, this kind of thing just isn't part of the curriculum. If you want to be part of the curriculum, you have to put it there, and so that's what we do. I think that substitute teachers should all be trained in uh, climate stuff. They should be able to teach that subject.
Hmm.
So whenever somebody doesn't come in for some reason, kids get a dose of climate. Now kids are are the ones who are going to be the most severely impacted by climate change, and so they should be the most, and they are the most concerned. And what we need them to do is we need them to get their parents off their lazy asses and do something about it. It's just like smoking. All the advertising in the world didn't stop parents from smoking. It's kids that got us to stop smoking. It's Pop, I don't
Right.
want you to die. Can you please stop smoking? And kids are going to ask us, hey, Pops, I want to live in the nice world like you lived in. Can you please stop burning carbon-based fuel?
Right. That's true. I got my mom to stop smoking. It was a long time ago, but yeah,
Yeah,
I totally agree. That was the one of the big things that turned
yeah. So
smoking
we
around.
focus on the kids. Yeah,
So let's talk a little more Hawaii. So lots of obviously a lot of opportunity for solar PV, but it also gets to be nighttime in Hawaii, like other places. Tell us a little bit about
right.
the work you're doing, and I guess maybe part of the policy in Hawaii, but also the specific work you're doing in the battery area.
Yeah, so what happened was when the electric company said, sorry, we can't hook up any more solar, no more grid tie solar. For example, my house in Honolulu, they were saying, no way, you can't have solar on your house. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? Who are you to tell me that I can't have solar on? Well, you can't connect to the grid. I says, well, what's the solution to that? And I disconnected my ranch on the Big Island from the grid. And how do you do that? So first of all, we built a little bit bigger than usual solar array on my energy lab. I called it the energy lab now because it kind of looks like that. And we started playing around with different kinds of energy storage. Our first battery was a vanadium redox flow battery. It sounds very nasty chemically, and it is. A year after we had it installed, the company was bought by some Chinese company, and we never heard from them again. It stopped working, and I said, "Oh," and we still have those nasty chemicals at the ranch, by the way. I said the next battery is going to be a benign chemistry that I don't mind having at my ranch at the end of life, and it's going to be made from a company that's still going to buy a company that's still going to be around 20 years from now. So we searched for that, and it was Sony of all companies. You know, I used to do a lot of business with Sony when I was in the game business. So I was good friends. I was even good friends with the president of Sony, who used to run the game business for North America. Anyway, they had a battery. They were the first ones to come out with lithium batteries, believe it or not, in 1991. And they had come out with a new chemistry, lithium iron phosphate. And the lithium iron phosphate battery, that chemistry, first of all, it's benign. It doesn't have any cobalt or manganese. You know, the Tesla or the iPhone batteries are lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese, and you know they're about to rape the bottom of the ocean to get manganese nodules. And lithium comes from and cobalt comes from a war zone in Africa, for Christ's sakes. So uh, this chemistry, lithium iron phosphate, has all kinds of good things about it. It doesn't heat up the way cobalt batteries heat up, so it doesn't need a cooling system. If you look inside of a Tesla Powerwall, it's got a crazy complicated set of moving parts where it's moving liquid around to cool itself down. If it overheats, if you overheat a nickel cobalt manganese battery, it will catch on fire. And this is not fire. This is fireworks. Basically, if it spontaneously combusts, it will not stop until it's completely used up. The instruction to firefighters is stand back and wait till it's over
And you can't use water
because
either.
what? Yeah, water has no effect on it at all. It's like trying to spray water on fireworks. It just doesn't work. Anyway, so lithium iron phosphate, benign chemistry, um, landfill at the end, no problem. It doesn't have any poison effect. If it happens to be in a fire, it doesn't contribute to the fire. There's a little bit of electrolyte, like most batteries have electrolyte, and that electrolyte basically you can put that out with a hose, no problem. So basically, this is a kind of battery that you can have inside of buildings or inside of houses. And so I took my ranch off grid, I took my house off grid, and people started asking me, can you help me take my house or my whatever off grid? And now I have a business called Blue Planet Energy, which does exactly that. We're 25 employees, we have 200 dealers across the country, and we are selling the safest, coolest battery systems on the market. Now, the drawback of lithium iron phosphate is that it's bigger and heavier than nickel, cobalt, manganese. So it's really not good for cars or laptops or phones because weight and size in those devices is everything. But if you have a stationary storage like a house, you don't need ludicrous mode in your house. If your house is going on ludicrous mode, if your house is ludicrous mode, you're having a real serious problem.
I want plaid for
So
my
you
house. Okay.
so yeah we're so anyway that's Blue Planet Energy.
That's great, Hank. So that's very interesting about what you were saying about the solar and what the work you did in Hawaii. But now you have your sights set beyond Hawaii, and you're working with small island nations. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so obviously, if we go 100% renewable in Hawaii, you know, we're all going to feel good, and we're going to become a nice tourist destination, eco-friendly, and all that. But we're still going to get killed by massive hurricanes, which are coming down the pike. We used to have two or three named hurricanes per year in the old days, and now we have like a dozen named hurricanes that come towards Hawaii from Mexico, California, that side, and it's just a matter of time before we're like Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico got hit. You know, we move our electricity on basically on wooden sticks with wires, and those wooden sticks with wires don't last in a hurricane. They weren't built for Cat 5 hurricanes. So um, anyway, uh, even if we're 100% effective in Hawaii, that we're still going to get killed. So what does that mean? It means that we have to fix the rest of the world. And the answer to that is I started a new foundation called the Blue Planet Alliance. And first of all, we're going to do what we did in Hawaii to the other islands in the world who are in the same situation as Hawaii. So we're going to get them to have a mandate, and then we're going to help them figure out how their utility can make more money by switching to renewables. These islands are grouped together. They're called the Small Island Developing States, SIDS, and there's 57 countries in the SIDS organization. They're all members of the United Nations. 57 countries means they have more than 25% of the votes in the United Nations. So they are a powerful political bloc in the United Nations. So that's my entry point into getting every country in the world to have a mandate and to follow up figuring out what the business plan for their utility should be so that they can stop using fossil fuel for electricity. This is a top-down approach, and you know, top-down is nice, but it really hasn't worked. I mean, in its best day, the UN had the Paris Agreement and all of that kumbaya. Are we on track to stop us from getting, past 2 degrees? And the answer is no, we're not. And scientists tell us now we have to actually stay under 1.5 degrees. Does the UN have even a chance of achieving that? And the answer is no, not really. It's just not how the UN works. So we have to think about how to do this from the bottom up. So the United People instead of the United Nations. And I think it's the two. It's both sides have to work at the same time, just like what we did in Hawaii. Both sides, the people have to rise up and say we demand change, and the politicians have to rise up and say yes, we'll give you that change, and the business will have to chime in. So there's a couple of things that I'm doing for the bottom up approach. One is I've come up with a rating system. When you go to I don't know, hotels.com or Amazon, or when you rate your Uber driver, basically you give them 5 stars. If your driver is really good, it's 5. And by the way, I used to be a taxi driver. Now I was a nice taxi driver, but most taxi drivers kind of are jerks because it doesn't matter whether they're nice or not, and they could be grumpy and it doesn't matter. But if you're an Uber driver, you better be nice, because if you're not getting more than 4.7 stars, you're no longer driving an Uber. And so taxi drivers went from being, I don't know, jerks to being like Uber people. And I think that we should be able to get people and companies to make that same transformation. Now, how do we do that? We have to rate them on the eco-friendliness of their product or their service. And instead of 5 stars, I want to give them 5 planets. And so 5 planets, a 5 planet object has basically, we've checked, and their supply chain, their worker, the way they treat their workers, the chemistry, the end of life, circular economy, all these things. We rate these companies with all of those different uh, those different areas. And then when you go to hotels.com, you can, with one touch, find out what's the most eco-friendly hotel in your next destination. And then people start making those choices. Guess what? More hotels are going to become more eco-friendly, and more products are going to become more eco-friendly. The vision of the Blue Planet Alliance is to create a world in which humanity and nature live in harmony. Full stop. And so,
Okay.
if we can,
No,
sorry.
keep going. Yeah, finish up. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's the rating system. We've already hooked up with a company that actually does the rating, and so all of that, the technical stuff of collecting the data from dozens of rating companies or organizations, that's all filtered into a set of numbers. We take that set of numbers and we display it onto websites. We're just getting started on that side of it.
So actually, it
But
reminds
that's
me
so that's a rating.
that you're also working in the gamification side, or actually working with games. I see Sam is down in the audience. Someone you're mentoring. Sam's developing a board game based on Project Drawdown. And by the way, folks, you can follow
There
Sam
you
there.
go.
But you're also working in the game area on sort of climate change in gaming. Is that right?
Yeah. So the second way, because I'm a game designer, I figure, and that's how I met Sam. By the way, we're at a drawdown conference, and because I'm known
Yeah, go ahead.
um, as the Tetris guy, they said, okay, gamification, that must be you. So I ended up on the table of figuring out how to gamify this whole thing. And yes, Sam is making a game, but I'm thinking, I don't want to create a game and then change people's minds and hope that they're going to do something in real life. I want to make a real life game. And so the real life game that I'm creating is basically an action game. So it's a Yelp for climate action. Well, climate action is one way of putting it, because it's not just climate that needs to be fixed. There's a whole bunch of other things that need to be fixed in order for us to create a world in which humanity and nature live in harmony. So basically, the way it works is we give you a list of things that you could possibly do. When you pick one of those things, you get points for doing it. The more things you do, the more we know what kind of thing you're likely to do, and the more we can guide you into actions that fit you. Now that's a good use of AI. The smallest action is like turn off a light switch, or pick up a piece of rubbish, or I don't know, turn off a faucet, or those are small actions. Even eat a vegetarian meal, and the more actions that you take, the more points you accumulate. You go up a level, and when you go up a level, we give you more difficult things to do, and so we basically baby you into doing bigger and bigger and bigger things. And where do we get these actions? Well, one place to get actions is NGOs like the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club peppers me with emails. Can you write your congressman to do this or to do that? And so basically, they're limited to their email list of their members, and every NGO has their email list that they blast when they want something done. But what they need to be able to do is get outside their email list and get onto the general population. And so the idea is to have these actions being fed in by NGOs or by smart people. I mean, anybody can add an action as long as it's not a stupid action, as long as it moves the world in the direction of a world where humanity and nature live in harmony. And the actions are categorized. I have four categories. I have energy, which has everything to do with carbon, waste, which has circular economy, plastic in the ocean, and all that, landfill, and nature. And nature is all about rebuilding nature, putting back the forest or the coral, and then of course others, just in case something doesn't fit into those other categories. Um, but the interesting part is going to be when we get celebrities involved. The idea is to get a celebrity to sponsor an action. And when somebody, one of their fans, actually does that action, then not only does the fan get points, but the celebrity gets points. And so it becomes a competition between celebrity to see who can get their fans to do the most good in the world. I'm talking about movie stars. I'm talking about musicians or sports figures. Anybody who's like, a celebrity of some kind can can become somebody who causes big change in the world. So, this is gamification on a massive scale. And people say, "Oh, I don't play games," and I say, "Nonsense! You collect points when you fly on United, and you stand in the front of the line when you reach platinum, so that you can get on the plane first. That's basically status. And what does getting on the plane first actually mean? It means you get to sit on the plane longer than everybody else. So it's a dubious honor to get on a plane first. They should reward me for by giving me the chance to be on the plane last. Don't think that way. People don't think that way. People want like the idea of status. And I think that by giving people status, by going up levels, eventually that status will count for something. For example, they will have a special section in a sports arena for people of a certain status level. I mean, they have done climate heroes. You can call them climate heroes, whatever, or future heroes. Or in a music concert, they get in first. When you go to TED, if you're a quote unquote sponsor, which means that you paid more, you get to go into the auditorium, like 5 minutes before the rest of the people, so you get to sit next to the stage. So that's a status thing, and I think that we can use this status at some point in the future, or it's something that people will work towards.
Okay. Well, speaking of movie stars, let me ask you one final question before we go to audience Q&A. There's a movie coming out about your life, and it's starring Taron Egerton, who played Elton John in Rocket Man. So this is not like a little indie movie here. This is kind of a serious thing. Can you just tell us a little bit about how that came to be and what you think about how it's going so far and maybe when it's coming out, et cetera?
Yeah, yeah. So I, it's kind of terrifying to have them make a movie about you, especially when it's Hollywood gets involved, because it's 75%. How can I say Hollywood and 25% reality. Um, so we're in the business of licensing Tetris, everything to do with Tetris, and so a Hollywood outfit came to us and wanted the option to tell the Tetris story. Now, the Tetris story that they're making the movie about it starts with me finding Tetris at the Consumer Electronics Show in 1988, and it kind of goes through my connection to Tetris, culminating with me going to Moscow uh, twice to get the Game Boy and the console rights, and negotiating with the Soviets, which is sort of happening at the same time as the fall of the Soviet Union. So it combines Tetris and the fall of the Soviet Union. Now they've already done all of the filming, so it's in post production now. Um, we don't know when it's coming out. It's funded by Apple. Apple's funding movies now. They're trying to become a content provider, just like Netflix, and so it's really up to Apple when they want to release
Did
it.
you spend time with Taron and like talk? Did he like ask you about your life and what it was like in Russia and
Yeah,
everything?
yeah. We zoomed. The issue was that they filmed it right in the worst part of the pandemic, and if I, they asked me to do a cameo, and they filmed it in Glasgow, so I would have had to go to London and spend 14 days in quarantine, being fed through a door, before I could take a train ride up to Glasgow. The whole film crew was in a kind of a bubble. Nobody got in who wasn't tested, that kind of thing. So to prevent an outbreak of COVID within that group, they were very, very careful. And so I didn't end up going. But I did talk to him. He seems like a nice guy. Doesn't look anything like me.
Yeah, I saw the pictures. Well, I mean,
But who cares about that?
whatever. And then there's I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, but there's some part of the movie didn't actually happen. Like the Russian beautiful spies are coming after you and all that kind of stuff. Is some of that in the movie as well?
Well, I can't really,
Okay.
tell you the whole story. You're
Okay.
gonna have to go see the movie.
Sure. Anyway, thank you for updating us. That's exciting, and looking forward to seeing that when it comes out. But let's move to some audience Q&A. And I saw Betsy was first up on the stage. So Betsy, what's your question for Hank?
Thanks, Dan. Hi, Hank. We've had the pleasure to meet a few times, mutual friends, and you're much better looking than that actor. Um, pardon me while I breathe heavily, burning up some clean energy on my Peloton while I listen. I was hoping you'd say, Hank, that they're deaf, that you made them promise to put your climate change story in the movie before you let them make it. Will we see anything about that? But that's not my question. My question is this. Sorry. You got me when you said we need to get their parents to get off their, what'd you say, to get off their asses. Well, my
Lazy
slogan
ass.
for my radio show is we need to wake up and smell the carbon and get off our gases. Not only do we have the climate crisis, but also obesity, but that's secondary. How do you think, and you're doing great things educating children, and boy, I just got an education on energy listening to you, and I've been interviewing experts for many years. It's the adults that I've been trying to reach, because we can't just wait for Greta and gang to, come up in age and become the journalists, the technicians, the engineers. We don't have that kind of time. I don't have to tell anyone in this room that. I've been trying to get network news to recognize that this is the biggest stories not getting told, interesting, important. Do you think that would help, as I firmly believe, to get more cooperation from the people who are supposed to be bringing us the news, think they're covering climate, but are really only just beginning to skim the surface, and no dedicated program on non-solutions. Last point, we moved to Texas 3 years ago, and our neighbors fought us putting solar panels on our house as it's 110 degrees in hill country. And that's the kind of mentality that's out here and everywhere, unfortunately. Eco literacy is a big problem. So that's the piece of the puzzle I think is missing. And since you're doing such an excellent job of educating and outreach, just wondered if you had any thoughts about how to reach people who are out of school and really don't know nearly enough. Thank you.
Yeah. The answer to the first question, which is, I don't. We lost control of that movie a long time ago. We tried to sort of keep it to reality and what's actually happened, but ultimately it's a movie and it's entertainment, and so we didn't really get to come up with any messages. Hopefully, the movie will get people to become more interested in the rest of my life. But on the energy side, um, yes, of course, we have to we have to have more news and more information. I'm on Facebook, and I still have people on the other side who are saying that there's no such thing as climate change, that it's just a natural occurrence, and blah blah blah. They're like totally disconnected. It's kind of like the anti-vaxxers. They have some kind of a religious feeling that that nothing's going wrong.
It's the same people, and they're my neighbors. Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. Um, you that you don't want to tell them they're stupid, because they're not. They're just people like us. You just need to gently say, this is what I'm doing. This is going to save me this much money. My air conditioner is going to run for free, because you're in Texas. If it's 100 degrees outside, you've got to be burning all kinds of fossil fuel or whatever to cool your house down.
Have
Well,
solar panels, but yeah.
when you have solar panels, the sun is providing you the energy for the cooling of your house. It makes all the sense in the world. So there are ways to appeal to people that aren't that doesn't involve saying you're wrong. Because if you say to somebody you're wrong, then they become defensive, and then you don't make progress. So the answer is that we've got to get them to do something, make some change which they can agree with. Like, if you put solar on your roof, your electricity bill is going to go down, and you're going to be safe from the next time there is a power outage. That kind of thing. These are all things that people can understand.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
yeah. So
I'm going to add, by the
yeah. So
way,
I
that
think that
anyone who's really interested in this topic, because there's so much we can spend obviously hours talking about that. But I just did post the interview with George Marshall, who wrote the book "Don't Even Think About It: Why Our Brains Are Wired to Ignore Climate Change," and he focuses a lot on how to reach people who aren't in this room, the non-climate people, and all the techniques. And we had a very great discussion about that. So anyone who's interested can listen to the in-depth discussion on that side. So anyway, thank you, Betsy, for that. Robert?
Can I just ask one follow up? I just because that was half the question. The other half was, do you think and do you know anybody who's working on trying to get more mainstream media? We don't have time to go for me to talk to my neighbors and one on one. That helps, of course, but it's got to be much faster than that. And I really think because we don't have that, too many Americans don't understand the urgency. The dots are not being connected, and if they get that we're in trouble, they don't know how many solutions are out there. So why not put the solutionaries on the air where the general public, millions of Americans, still get their news from television?
Yeah, the problem with it is that who controls what the news is, and if you've got like the Koch brothers that are feeding some news channel, um, then it's very difficult to get that kind of information on those news channels, and those news channels are unfortunately the ones that are being watched by the people who don't get it. So they're being fed misinformation or not no information. That's a vicious cycle. In the old days, every news how can I say newsroom would have to present all sides of the stories, but it's not that way anymore. They're feeding people what they want to hear, and so it's kind of difficult under those circumstances. If I go to CNN or MSNBC, every once in a while I will hear something interesting, um, but if I go to Fox, they'll be laughing at people who believe in climate change. So under those conditions, it's kind of tough. But that's only in
Exactly.
this country. That's this country. The rest of the world is different.
Exactly. We're the only country that has active denial. And just last comment, and I'll let you take over. Um, I'm not glad that you had the heart attack, but I'm very grateful you had your eco epiphany. I'm not a game player, but I would play a green game about climate change. So
There you
thank
go.
you, Hank, thank you for all you're doing. And you
Thank
too,
you.
Dan. And hi, Sam.
Okay. Let's move on to Robert. Robert, welcome to the stage. What's your question for Hank?
No. It looks like Stacy opened up. Stacy can go
Stacy,
first.
do you
I
have your
can wait.
question?
Thank
Oh gosh. Yeah, I'm so sorry. My phone is like I'm like hitting the thing and it's not going. I just one thing first to tag on to Betsy, I would just say watch the evening news and see what's advertised. And this is the realization that I came to because of coming from the automotive world and now living firmly in the bike world and seeing the disparate funding that is available in those industries and what's needed to keep the whole machine running, so to speak. They don't want to promote bikes and all that because the cars are the ones who buy their advertising. Whether it's a newspaper or television or on social media or whatever, they have more money to spend. And so they get more coverage through the news and otherwise. And it's when you realize like all the things like, we're built a society built on consumption. So unless somebody is writing the check, we don't really get the coverage for it because we're taking airtime away from somebody who is an existing industry that's willing to pay. Oftentimes, I believe that there is a capitalistic way to make forward, but not it's not easy or immediate. And then,
Absolutely, Stacy. So Hank, maybe that can be your next venture, a green news network, GNN. Thanks.
yeah,
Yeah.
something to get the word out. You just have to have compelling programming or whatever. I think subliminal messages on Netflix would probably be ideal, but that's a whole other.
I think those are illegal. I think that I'm not so worried about transportation as I used to be. Um, Ground transportation. We because of the incentives we passed in Hawaii, we have the highest per capita electric vehicles in the country. Um, it's a question of infrastructure. Once the infrastructure for bringing having charging stations everywhere, the barrier to entry for electric vehicles will go down. And I think every car company reads the writing on the wall and they realize that they have to come out with electric vehicles. So I see Ford advertising an electric F-150. I think that's awesome. So my hat is off to Elon for having started that change. And now all of the other car companies are scrambling to come up with electric vehicles. And I think that that's the future. So I think we're kind of okay. Now, electric vehicles, the only problem with electric vehicles is that it changes the way electricity gets consumed. So if you live in an apartment building, for example, and there are 100 units in your building, there's only a certain amount of electricity going into that building. If now 100 people got electric cars, it's like adding 100 more apartments to that building because an electric car takes about as much energy as a house or an apartment, and so it's difficult to make that transformation. But hydrogen is another story. So um, one of the things I'm doing at my ranch is with the excess energy, and the way it works is the solar array, if you're off grid, has to be a little bit bigger than if you're grid tied. Why? It has to work all the time. It has to work on a cloudy day. And so if your solar array is big enough to work on a cloudy day. On a sunny day, you've got all kinds of extra energy. And what do you do with that? Well, what Hawaii does with it right now is they curtail it, which means they throw it away. How idiotic is that? Well, what you can do with the curtailed energy is you can make hydrogen. And the hydrogen is a fuel for trucks and buses or even cars in fuel cells. And a battery electric car takes hours to charge, whereas a hydrogen electric car takes minutes to fill up. So, it's a sort of a catch-22 that we're in. The hydrogen infrastructure doesn't exist, and the cars there to consume that hydrogen don't exist. And, which come first, the chicken or the egg? And the answer is they have to both happen at the same time. So we're trying on the Big Island the Big Island of Hawaii, to get the city and county to buy a bunch of hydrogen buses to replace their ailing diesel buses. And then we can create a hydrogen infrastructure to feed those buses. And with that infrastructure, we can start supplying trucks, buses, sedans, and whatever. So I think we're on the right track.
Okay, very good.
I'd actually love to level that up, and that is that you know how you were saying every tourist that gets off, we should be planting a tree for them, or trees to in an attempt to offset. I look at it as, the glory of Hawaii and other island states and nations is that you have a captive audience. You don't have the sprawl that we do here in the States and other places. And it's the perfect place to have, and especially with all that those tourism dollars coming in, don't give them a car. Don't let them have a car. Let there be let them subsidize the most posh, amazing bus network that is available for everyone. And there's a surcharge on every airline ticket, and then it goes into that, and your transportation is, half paid for. And then have a network of golf carts or whatever that's at the end of the lane if they need to get to the bus stop or something, if it's not close enough by. I don't know, but it just seems like electric buses, hydrogen buses, what have you, is a much better way to go than using all those resources to put them into those. Hey, it can survive a crash test at whatever, the amount of battery to, that's used, all the material. It's more wasteful than if it were put into like the most amazing transit system on earth. So if you can get that to happen, give me a call. I'll be there to help.
Hey, Robert,
Okay,
welcome to the
thank
stage.
you.
What's your question for Hank?
Hello, Hank. How are you doing? Thanks for touching on the hydrogen. One thing we know, habit makes behavior. And so I love that you're approaching the islands. I'm going to be looking into that to track you on that. But real quick, number one, want to thank you and Maya for your support with the Smithsonian. I just rotated off the Smithsonian Advisory Board with Maya, and I love your picture with your granddaughter. So that was really great because you guys supported our IKEA Culture Lab a couple of years ago that we had with the Smithsonian in your area. So
Cool.
love it. Question. Your gaming, I think you have a great thing there. But as I looked up the data on the number of users for Pokemon, which got people moving, and there's studies now where they're starting to use seniors to start to be active using Pokemon type of apps. So when you were talking about your app, particularly targeted to going green, energy, wasteland, that may not have been your app. I think if we're able to get either the government or the private sector to add some sort of reward to that, maybe you can get more people involved in that. I look at what people are doing currently with COVID, where they're doing, Ohio's doing that, I don't know, somebody wins if they do such and such. But I don't want to get into your programming, but I think you have something there. As long as there's an incentive there, I think the mindset of the younger people are there, and I think you got something. I look forward to seeing that. The question I have is, what's your status on that particular idea and initiative? And then lastly, relating to storage on solar, I spent a good amount of time in the developing world, and they're very industrious. If there was a way to teach them how to create their own solar storage, then we would have a bigger change also in those areas too. Thank you.
Yeah, on the gaming side, I still every once in a while play games. I play something called Word Crossy or whatever. It's kind of a ridiculous game. It's very repetitive, and all I get is like little gold coins, which mean nothing. And I'm collecting them, and I don't know why I'm collecting because they're never going to be tradable for anything in the real world. So, what I'm trying to say here is that people do things for points or virtual points. Um, they do a ridiculous amount of work to get those points and to compete with somebody else to get more points. So, all of these games, like Pokemon, the reward is virtual. There's no real tangible thing. Like, you don't have to pay somebody to play Pokemon. They play Pokemon for I don't know, for status or for, it's very strange. But I really don't like the idea of getting into money, because I want this system to work all over the world. And I want it to work in India. I want it to work in Brazil, all these places where things need to be done. And money is different or incentives are different, but they all play games, and they all play games for for points or virtual stuff. Now, the government can step in and say, if you're going to have a free concert, again, the people of a certain level can go in first, or those kinds of things, or I don't know, you get upgraded to first class in whatever it is. So these are all things that are um, free, like the airlines fill up their empty seats with mileage customers. So it's basically they're paying for that plane to fly anyway, so might as well fill up the plane. And so they're basically giving away stuff that's really not costing them anything. So I want to try to stay away from monetary, or because I really want this to be international. And your second question was, sorry, remind me.
Solar storage.
Oh, solar
Training
storage.
training people how, I know you did it yourself, but when we get to the point where people in developing countries that have a lot of sunlight can build
Yeah,
their own
yeah.
storage capability.
Yeah, so unfortunately, storage is still tough in that it takes a lot of technology or a lot of infrastructure. If you're in a place where you have water, like and mountains, you can do you can do hydro storage by pumping water uphill and getting it back down. But that requires, it's not something you can do on your own in a small way. Hydrogen is probably, at the end of the day, will be the cheapest way to store energy, because the chemicals for batteries are still expensive. If you're going to go off grid, the most expensive part of your system is still going to be the batteries for quite some time. Solar panels have come down in price so far that they're like commodities. So it's not about the panels anymore. It's about the storage, um, and more research has to be done to make cheaper storage. Um, so the chemical storage in batteries is the most efficient. Like our batteries, basically you put in 100% electricity, you get back 97% of what you put in. That's how efficient they are. But hydrogen, if you use the energy to make hydrogen, uh, you only get back 50% of the energy that you put in. So you have to make up for it by making more hydrogen. Right now, the materials for breaking water, the electra breaking water into hydrogen and oxygen, are still expensive, and that's just because it hasn't been done on a massive scale. Once we start having huge numbers of cars that run on hydrogen, just like internal combustion, the price of fuel cell will come down, and then it'll become more affordable. And storing hydrogen is not that big of a deal. You could store it in a tire if you if you needed, like an inner tube, if you needed a place to store hydrogen. So um, I think that is probably the way that it's going to end up. If we can give people little tiny electrolyzers and little fuel cells, or they can even cook with hydrogen. See, that's another whole problem we have in the world. People are still cooking with wood or with charcoal, and they're cooking indoors, and so they're like in the carcinogen, um, they're like breathing the carcinogens, and sometimes carbon monoxide gets produced and people die. This still happens all the time. If you burn hydrogen for a flame, the side product is water vapor. So there is no carbon involved. There is no carcinogen involved. So if we can switch all those people, by the way, there are places in the world where the forests are being denuded because people are cutting down the trees and bushes to make fire to cook food. How ridiculous is that? If we gave them a way to cook food without the carbon, without having to go through, cutting down the forest, I mean, they walk for hours to go and cut these little bushes so that they can cook. Um, yeah, these things need to be worked out. It's a matter of mass production, bringing down the cost to the point where everybody can
Very
have
good.
one.
Thank you, Robert. And now on to Sam. Hi, welcome, Sam. And what's your question for Hank?
Thanks, Dan. Hey, Hank. Hey, Betsy. Great to hear you all. Hank, like Betsy, the analogy that you were talking about for children convincing their parents to stop smoking really, really resonated with me, and hopefully you'll allow me to steal that one. On the point of hydrogen, I think it's really interesting what you're saying about the infrastructure being a big challenge there. What I'm wondering for Hawaii is, given that it's an island nation, would it not make sense to start there with hydrogen boats? Because if you look at fishing vessels, for example, they're always going to be coming back to the same port, and now you only need one hydrogen filling station rather than distributing them all over the place. And then my other question for you is, if you had to drop everything and do something completely different for climate, what would you do? What would you be doing if you had extra time on your hands?
Yeah, so it just so happens that I think it's called the Energy Explorer or something. It's a hydrogen fueled vessel that it just arrived in Hawaii, actually. Um, it's a giant catamaran covered with solar panels, and basically during the day they make hydrogen, and so they can keep on going at night using that hydrogen. Um, I think that is a solution that is like going to happen. They're headed to Japan to be there in time for the Olympics, so that the Olympics can like show hydrogen ship hydrogen shipping. But you're absolutely right. Um, having the hydrogen fueled ships is definitely a way to go. I went to Iceland and I met the guy who built, I think, 5 or 6 hydrogen fueling stations. Like, I don't know, it must be 15 years ago. It was, he believed that the car companies were going to come out with hydrogen cars, and they didn't. They didn't come out when they said they would, and so those hydrogen stations were, how can I say, left useless for all that time. But he's moved on, and he's built a hydrogen fueled um, fishing vessel. Exactly what you're saying, and I think that is the way to go. The problem with shipping and fishing in general is when you're in international waters, you don't count that carbon as coming from your country. So all that shipping that goes on in international waters, they're just not count. Nobody's counting that. It's not my problem. And so um, it's hard to regulate what goes on in international waters. You can regulate what happens once a ship is in port. Like, I think that Carbon War Room with Richard Branson was working on this. The idea is if your ship, the cleaner your ship is relative to climate, the less your port fees are, your docking fees. And so then you can incentivize shipping companies to become more efficient because they can then save money on docking fees. And the ones that are quote unquote dirty would have to pay more. And so that would be a way for everybody to be incentivized to switch over to other sources of energy,
You
like
mentioned that's
hydrogen.
funny. I actually worked on the
Sorry.
shipping project for the Carbon War Room way back. This is a long time ago when it first got started. So, yeah, we got Maersk
Yep.
involved, and Maersk is the largest shipping company
Yep.
in the world. And so there's a lot of opportunity there for clean shipping.
Sorry, Sam, your
What would you
second
do if you had
question
more
was?
time?
Oh,
Yeah.
what
So
would I do different? What would I do? Yeah. If I knew that, then I'd be doing it. So I don't know. I don't know that um, I basically, when I started the Blue Planet Foundation in Hawaii, I had no idea how to do it or what I was going to do. All I knew was that I was going to do it, and that's all we need to know. It's I don't know how I'm going to solve or how we are going to solve the world's problems. All I know is that we are going to solve these world's problems. This is I was on a clubhouse talk the other day, about hope in climate, and I said this is not about hope. It's sink or swim. Hoping is not going to save you. You've got to figure out how to swim, how to survive. And I told the story of when I was surfing on the North Shore, and this is back in the old days when I first came to Hawaii. I was 18. They didn't have a surf report that could predict how big the waves are going to be, and so I was out surfing, and the waves got bigger, 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 and I was out of my how can I say, it was above my pay grade very quickly, and so I was trying to get in from surfing, and I lost my board. And this is in the day before leashes. So I was stuck in the white water, and white water is lighter than regular water because it's got bubbles in it. So it's harder to swim. And then I started getting a cramp, and I'm going like, holy shit, is this the way it ends? Because I could have easily drowned. And that I could have hoped that somebody was going to come and save me, but that wouldn't have saved me. I would have died. So I made up my mind that I wasn't going to die that day, and so I thought it through. I said, okay, what am I going to do to get out of this? And I said, obviously I can't use the muscle that's cramping. What other muscles do I have? And I completely changed my stroke to a backstroke, which is, by the way, a more efficient stroke than a crawl or a breaststroke. When you're in a backstroke, your face is out of the water, and you don't have to lift your head, which takes energy. So I backstroke my way out of onto the beach, and I saved myself. And this is what we have to do. We don't have to hope that something's going to happen. No, we have to do something, and it starts small, but it eventually is going to have to be big. And we're all going to have to do it. This is not something that is going to be done by a couple of people and everybody else is going to say, thank you very much. No, we are all going to have to carry a bucket and put out this fire. This is not something that we can wait for some Greta to grow up and fix the world. We're all going to have to be
Well,
part of
great.
this.
Thank
love
you.
it.
Thank you, Sam.
Love it. Thanks, Tank.
By the way, I'm not sure I'm going to get the exact order right because I'm using Club Deck here, which doesn't list it the same as the Clubhouse app. But let's see. Sequoia, welcome to the stage. And what's your question for Hank?
Thanks for having this room and really insightful, deep conversations. Two quick questions, Hank. The first, what do you think of the wind power versus the solar? Hydrogen obviously is interesting and has a lot of potential, but what do you think of wind? And then a second question is sort of your thoughts on a better term, you'll see it in my Clubhouse profile, for the term ecosystem services, which I think is too sterile and doesn't tell a really good story. And so I'm really trying to source lots of different opinions, and with your background in gaming, you might have some really interesting insights on a better term for ecosystem services, which is what our federal government has chosen to call the value that nature delivers to us inherently. Thank you.
Yeah, so wind and solar are actually both solar energy. Wind is caused by some bits of air in the world getting warm and then rising, and it sucks in the colder air from the surrounding areas. That's what wind is. Um, so it is another form of solar energy, and the issue is some places have wind and some places don't, and some places have solar and some places don't. So we're talking doing not talking. We're actually doing a microgrid in Alaska. Now in the summer, they have like plenty of solar, but in the winter there's almost no solar, but they have wind. And so you've got to use whatever natural resources you have for generating energy, um, that you can find in your area. So if there's wind, use the wind. If there's solar, use the solar. If you have both, use both. Solar in general covers a lot of real estate. And so we have the situation in Hawaii where we only grow 7% of our food in Hawaii. The rest is imported. And so there used to be pineapple and sugarcane. So we've got all this ag land, which is lying fallow. Well, guess where they're putting the solar panels? It's on the ag land. And so instead of growing food, now we're collecting electrons with solar panels. I much prefer to have houses or rooftops, which are places that collect heat anyway, covered with solar panels, than have, ag land covered with panels. And then wind, when you think about it, people don't like what it looks like. I'm originally from the Netherlands, so we kind of like windmills. Um, and Holland isn't the kind of place where you can hide a windmill. When you put a wind turbine somewhere, you can see it from the other side of Holland because it's so flat. And rather than people looking at it and say, "Oh, that's ugly," or this, that, and the other thing, or it kills birds. By the way, buildings with glass windows kill way more birds than windmill or wind turbines ever will. And you can put wind turbines offshore, where the wind is unimpeded uh, by geography. So yeah, I think the solution is both. Um, Solar has to be put wherever solar. I mean, I'm looking out at Honolulu, and I see some solar panels, but it's not even 5%, maybe 10% of the buildings have solar of some kind. Um, that's ridiculous. They should all have solar. They should be incentivized, and the electric company needs to figure out how to deal with it. That's how they should make money in the future, is by providing people with solar panels so that they can have distributed energy in neighborhoods that are now only fed by long wires. Anyway,
Yeah, and battery storage
um,
will help with that, of course, and vehicle to grid and all that kind of thing.
battery storage will help. As far as the words, eco, what is it?
Yeah, the federal government uses ecosystem services, and it's just such, and it's enshrined in their law now. And I'm hoping Deb Holland might
Yeah.
want
So
something a little more heart based, if you know what
yeah,
I mean.
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, so I gave it, we gave the our vision statement a lot of thought about how it would appeal to different kinds of people, and I don't have high hopes for the government to have that
I'll
kind of
throw in
vision.
nature's bounty.
You know, it, it's it's funny, but I'm friends with the guy who came up with Earth Day, Dennis Hayes. That's like we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and that was started off as a government thing, but they got real advertising companies involved in figuring out how to make it so that it became something that people would gravitate towards. Um, and originally, it was meant to be something like a college campus movement, but very quickly, Earth Day became a thing where mothers took their children, and it became a family thing. So Earth Day became a family thing, and so I think that we can learn from that. If the government wants people to do to get involved, yes, they have to become more family friendly, and they actually should ask people in the private sector rather than you know uh, have unmemorable or uninteresting words they should pay somebody to come up with a better idea.
Very good. Thank you. Let's see. Arjun, welcome to the stage. And what's your question for Hank?
Hello, everyone. First, Hank, I am so appreciative of your time that you're here and sharing your stories. I feel like you're the kind of person that I was told I would meet someday at Burning Man, and I'm like just grateful that this app exists because it makes it possible for all sorts of people to connect. Stacy as well, and Dan, we've had a number of conversations that I think have been really delightful. My thought, Hank, is you've said so many things that I think are really true about like cultural shifts that have to happen, and speaking to like children as sort of like advocates for like how to make a shift. I think one of the shifts that I think about a lot is also like just um, reducing our overall consumption and being mindful of what and how we consume in two ways. Like I think about it in transportation, like reducing the scale of vehicle that is necessary to do the thing we're doing. I think that there's some inherent inefficiencies that we've normalized in cars that just shouldn't be. But the other one that I think about as well is food. And I think that that's like a consumption that we do every day, that we have some agency over with every meal that we make or consume. And I'm curious to know if you have any thoughts on shifting food cultures as an effort for sustainability. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so if you're going to, as Gandhi says, if you have to be the change that you want to see in the world, and so I'm trying to change my life to be like what what I would be if I was living in the future. So I stopped eating meat, um, and I think meat is a huge contributor to climate change. I mean, just methane alone and deforestation is just horrible. If we could stop eating meat as a species, we don't need to eat meat. And then I was reduced to eating fish and vegetables, and then I became friends with Sylvia Earle, and I told her, Sylvia, I stopped eating meat for sustainability reasons. What fish can I eat? And she said, "Oh, Hank, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you shouldn't be eating any fish." I said, "Why? Isn't there like what about farm grown fish?" She said, "Well, 30% of the fish that we catch in the ocean goes to feed farm grown fish." Um, as more and more people in the world become affluent, like in China, they all want to eat fish. They all want to eat sushi, and we're basically going to take all of the top like sushi fish out of the ocean very quickly because they're worth so much money now. Oh my gosh! So sushi is probably, and having lived in Japan for 18 years, is probably my favorite food. So taking it off the table is like a big struggle for me. But recently, there's a vegetarian sushi restaurant that opened in Honolulu, and I've eaten there, and it's amazing. It's amazing. Not a single fish is involved in any of it, and there's already some traditional vegetarian sushi, but they made up all kinds of new, with mango, with avocado, with tomato, and it looks it looks like sushi, and it's delicious. So I think that as and when we start to value, alternative ways of eating. Oh, and by the way, Impossible Burger. Oh man, I got burgers back on the menu. I love it. So I can go to a burger shop and say, Impossible Burger, please. And if they don't have it, sorry, I'm not eating at your restaurant. So I think that the future of food and personal behavior, yes, in my game app, one of the things will be eat a vegetarian meal. And the more you do it, the more you get used to it. And maybe you can go like a week without eating without eating meat, and that would give you certain more points as you go up levels. And eventually, that's how I quit smoking. By the way, um, I used to smoke. I smoked for 30 years, from 15 to 45, and one day I decided I was only going to smoke one cigarette that day, and I did this for 2 days in a row. My brother-in-law said, "You idiot! If you smoke one cigarette, you're still smoking." So I said, "Yeah, you're right." And so the next day I said, "Today I'm not going to smoke a cigarette." I went for a whole day. And then the next day I did the same. I wake up and say, "I'm not going to smoke a single cigarette today." I did that for 2 weeks, where each day I woke up and said, "I'm not smoking a cigarette." And at the end of 2 weeks, I wasn't smoking anymore. I didn't have to think about it. And I think the same thing goes for our eating habits. Wake up one day and say, I'm not going to eat meat today, or I'm not going to eat fish today, or by the way, I've tried fasting. I'm not going to eat it all today. And these are all interesting things, and they're all possible, because everybody can get on a plane and not smoke for 8 hours. So why can't they just like stretch that to 24 hours or 48 hours or a week and stop smoking? And the same thing goes for our eating habits. But it all starts with ourselves. We have to think, what is it that we're doing that we can change, which isn't going to. I mean, I can go to any restaurant and get vegetarian food. It's no big deal. And when I get on an airplane, there's always a vegetarian option. So uh, the more people that ask for it, the more interesting it will be. Um, and Burning Man, you go to Burning Man, Arjun?
I have not been to Burning Man. I've been invited numerous times, and I've always felt like, oh, this year is going to be the year I go. And then like 2020 was totally going to be that year. But yeah, I still have yet to.
So I've been 11 out of the last 13 burns. I For a while I had my own camp, which got out of hand, and I'm working with the Burning Man organization to try to figure out how to reduce the carbon footprint of Burning Man. We want to become sustainable by 2030, and so one of the things that I'm working on is providing power to camps, solar power to camps, and
Got to
it's
let
just
people
kind
in
of a
early
side
if they
pet
have electric
project.
vehicles, right? Just like the airlines that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, like so the way that Burning Man works is the more interesting and the cleaner your camp is. When I say clean, camps are rated at the end of the burn. They people go around looking for matter out of place, and so there's a map of the entire Burning Man. And if your camp is like red, then you're farther away. Your camp next year is going to be farther away from the center of action, farther from the burn. And so everybody's fighting to get closer. And so to get closer, you have to be more interesting, and your camp better be clean. So at the end of what we do with our camp, we're crawling around looking for tiny little things that don't belong there and matter out of place. But I want to have an
Right.
energy map in addition to all of that. So I want to calculate how much energy people are using, or how much fossil fuel people are using, because there are diesel generators and gasoline generators all over the place. It's horrible. And get those camps again to reward them by giving them better position. And I think in the real world it should be the same thing. If you have if your home is more efficient, your property tax should be less. I mean, if everybody had to pay more or less property tax depending on how energy efficient their
Wow.
home was, guess what? Everybody would have better insulation. Everybody would start having solar panels or solar hot water heaters. I mean, you have to incentivize people in the right way. And the government can still collect the same amount of money, but they will change the behavior of the people that are living
That'd
in
be great, by the way. Boy,
in their
have you heard
jurisdiction.
of that happening anywhere? I have not heard. I mean, there's incentives for solar and things like that, so there's that part of it,
I know. I just
but not property tax. That's a new one.
Yeah, I just made this
Okay,
up
well there you go.
right
Now you
now.
know what
You
your
heard
next
it
thing is. If
first.
you had more time, there we go. Get that going in Hawaii. That'll be great.
It's the same thing with cars, though. Like when you go to get your safety check, or when you go to pay tax for registering your car. internal combustion cars need to cost more than battery
They're doing the
or
opposite
hydrogen
in
cars.
Texas, though. They're putting
It's
a
just
tax
that
on
simple.
electric vehicles. It's far more than the tax on fossil fuel cars. So they're of course they're an oil state, petro state. Not too surprising. Hey,
Yes, they're an oil
we have
state.
one
It's like,
more person on the
let's
stage ask you a question. Gunter, welcome to the stage. And what's your question for Henk?
Hello, Gunther speaking. I'm an entrepreneur from Belgium. So, Henk, I see that you have been living in Holland, so you can imagine a little bit in what kind of environment and region I am working and living.
yeah.
I have good news. The propriety tax in Belgium, when you have an energy efficient house, is lower than when you have a house with an energy efficiency which is worse. So we
Okay.
clearly have the incentives on isolation, solar panels being energy neutral in place. So the past 25 years I've been occupied with decentralized energy production, and I'm an entrepreneur in 100% electrical vehicles for the past 10 years.
Huh.
And I was a little bit puzzled by the emphasis you put on hydrogen. Hydrogen for us clearly is a means of storing energy when you have an excess of energy harvested from solar and wind plants.
Yep.
And it's basically in Western Europe, electricity is the main energy source, is becoming the main energy source of use now. All incentives and the changing production mix of electricity is tending massively towards solar and wind. And for us, I subscribe the fact that you say hydrogen for applications like cooking and maybe heating. But when you look to the efficiency of using hydrogen in your transportation, it's not clearly, if you go mainstream in dense populated areas where you have an electricity grid and everything is connected. For me, I feel that electricity, renewable electricity, is the main source of getting to the most efficient solution. And when you are in an isolated area, maybe hydrogen is an alternative solution or opportunity. But I feel that electricity today is taking the main stage.
Yeah. So the problem with electricity is that our electric infrastructure that we have today isn't built for electric vehicles. We need to double the amount of electricity we have pretty much everywhere in apartment buildings, in houses, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, look at the house that I'm living in. I buy an electric car. Now it's like my consumption has doubled. Is how can I say, is my neighborhood wired? If everybody has an electric car, is my neighborhood wired to be able to handle that? And the answer is no, it's not. And the same thing with garages in apartment buildings. I bought a Tesla. I wanted to put a charging station when I was living in a condominium. I wanted to put a charging station in my stall, and they said no, you can't. And I said, why not? They said, well, the homeowners association says no, you can't have anything except a car. So we passed a law saying that the homeowner association cannot stop you from putting a charging station in your stall. But then it still remains that the building itself doesn't have enough juice coming into it for everybody in that building. Maybe 5% of the people can have electric cars, but it was just not built to have double the electricity. And so that's one problem. The other problem is long distance, and everybody has range anxiety. So if you have a truck and you're trying to go across country or trying to go across Europe, you can't really afford to be hanging out somewhere for 8 hours while your truck or your vehicle is charging. That's the advantage of hydrogen. Hydrogen, you can charge your car in the same or less time than it takes to charge, a gas-powered or fossil fuel-powered car. So that infrastructure, once that infrastructure exists, trucks and buses can go anywhere in Europe without having to worry about having to spend time charging or finding the infrastructure to charge. At the end of the day, hydrogen is much cheaper to store than energy in batteries at the end of the day. And
I,
so
I,
I
I
think
agree,
really,
Henk. I agree. You want but I
so
want to give you one thing, just to end this. I don't know if you know Björn Nieland. That's a Norwegian guy who does 1,000 kilometer tests with electric cars. And earlier this month, he proved, no, the end of May, he proved that for the second or third time that an electric car in Europe can travel for 1,000 kilometers in the same time as a normal internal combustion engine car. So the supercharging infrastructure in Europe for long distance, for personal vehicles, is in place. And I understand your thoughts on hydrogen, but when I see in Western Europe the 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 delay that the whole hydrogen project has with regards to the development of the whole electric mobility infrastructure is huge, and it's here things are happening based on electricity. That's just one
Well,
thing that I wanted
thank
to
you.
comment on, and
Yeah, that's a good
which
point.
puzzles
And
me.
by the way, I've been on some
got
rooms
it.
talking about this too. I think for passenger vehicles, batteries are going to win, and one reason is it's much cheaper to power a battery car than a hydrogen car for a whole bunch of reasons, including efficiency as well as the cost of hydrogen versus batteries. And you have to watch out for the fact that 95% of hydrogen today is a fossil hydrogen. So there's a lot of challenges ahead, but hydrogen has a huge role in the future, including for bigger vehicles and long-term energy storage, and especially industrial applications. I think that's something maybe we'll focus on in the future in one of our rooms. But getting cement and steel and things like that off of fossil fuels hydrogen play a big role. In fact, I think there were some announcements just the other day about steel in Europe getting for using hydrogen and get new projects getting funded for that. Anyway, Hank, we covered so many different subjects today. I really want to thank you so much. There's a bigger picture emerging for me from this talk, and that is that someone who is dedicated to changing the world can do so much to get others involved and make really big changes. So I just want to thank you for all the work you've done and all the work you're going to be doing going forward, and for teaching us that being dedicated to change is the first step in getting things changed, and that all of us can play an important role in making the world a better place in the future. And as you pointed out, we all have to do that. It's not going to be done just by individuals, a few individuals. So thank you again for showing us that. I guess maybe one of the bigger takeaways I have from today. But we covered so many things, and we didn't even have a chance to talk about the moon base. So we'll have to do that some next time. But thank you, Hank, and thank you to everyone who came on stage to ask questions, and
Next
thanks
time.
to everyone in the audience. I want to just say again, go ahead, please.
And I want to, I yeah, I want to say thank you to everyone who's listening, because I know all of you are going to change, and you're going to be part of the solution. You're going to change what you do and how you do it and when you do it, because that is the way of the future. And we, little by little, more and more people. And Burning Man is, by the way, when you go to Burning Man, it proves that people can change, because when people go to Burning Man, they behave differently. And there's a bunch of rules, like you have to be nice to people, you can't throw any garbage out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these rules, and people all live by these rules. So all we have to do is come up with rules ourselves for our own lives and live that way, and then all of these problems will be solved. So I want to thank everyone in the audience, because I know you're all going to be part of the solution.
And thank you
So
again,
thank
Hank.
you.
And that concludes the interview with Henk Rogers. If you'd like to listen to other Climate Chat Club interviews, please search for Climate Chat Club on YouTube. This is Dan Miller, and thank you for listening.